Hi guys, welcome back. This is video 9 of our Unreal Engine 4 inventory video series. In the last video we had a look at getting the the non-stackable items, having a look at how we could toss them from the menu. I didn't mention in the last video, but I suppose you could kind of tell anyway through watching it. We haven't set up a system that when we toss the item it will kind of reappear back in the world as an item to pick up. What we're doing basically is just purging it from the array and just getting rid of that data from the array index. If it's something that you want to do to kind of have the item kind of respawn back in the world once you drop it from the inventory, it's not too difficult to set up. It would just be a simple matter of using kind of a spawn actor from at a specific location, just using the pickup class, using the item data of the item that you've tossed to kind of recreate a new item back in the world. For the purpose of these videos, we're just basically getting rid of them out of the array. So this video we're going to have a look at setting up how we would toss multiple items. So if we have an item that we can stack, how many of that item do we want to get rid of? So we'll have a look at kind of specifying a specific amount, and then we'll have a look at if we've kind of tossed the full amount, we'll remove it from the array. If not, we'll kind of just update the amount that was kind of already there. So we're going to jump back into the inventory widget. There's a bit of quick tidy up. We'll just get these all kind of commented. So this is just going to be the toss button selected. And these here are going to be the this is going to be the toss non-stackable item logic. Okay, so a couple of things that we need to set up first. We'll have to set up a system of checking how much we actually want to get rid of. So if you remember correctly in the design, if we just hide the toss single menu and have a look at the toss multiple menu, we put in these buttons to decrement and increment the toss count. So we're going to have to set up some functionality for these buttons, have a binding attached to this bit of text here, and then we'll have a look at setting the confirm and close buttons. So we're firstly going to have to set up the logic for selecting how much we want to actually toss. So we'll create a couple of variables to handle this. The first variable is going to be the amount to toss. And this is going to be an integer. There we go. What we'll do for the amount to toss is we'll set the default value to be 1, because we always want it to be at least 1. The next variable we'll set up will be another variable to handle what the maximum toss quantity actually is. And the maximum tossable quantity will basically just be whatever the quantity is. We'll feed that out and we'll set that as a variable of its own. So what we're going to do is just on the toss button selected, where we toggle between the multi and single, we're just going to set these variables in here. So the maximum tossable quantity is going to be set as whatever the quantity of the item was. So when we get that information, we'll feed that through into the maximum tossable quantity there. Just for good measure as well, we'll also set the amount to toss to 1 here as well. Just so we've got that kind of always reset back to 1 when we first kind of do this menu. So that bit's done there. The next bit is to have a look at the increment and decrement buttons to get these working. So we're going to have a look firstly at the increment toss button. And what we'll do is we will set this up using the onClicked method. So the player will have to manually click each time to increment or decrement. We could set this up with onPressed. In fact, actually, what we'll do is we'll set it up with onPressed, just to kind of keep it, make it a little bit more usable. So what we'll do is we'll create two new variables. We'll call the first one inc button pressed, and we'll make that a boolean, and we'll create another variable called dec button pressed. Okay, so what we'll want is the increment toss button. We'll want the onPressed function, onPressed event even, sorry, and we'll also want the onReleased pressed event as well. And all we're going to do here for the increment toss is we're going to set whether it is pressed or not. There we go. So Control W. So we'll set this to true on pressed, and we'll set it to false on released. And we'll just repeat the process with the decrement as well. So decrement toss, not on clicked. Let's just grab the on pressed and on released. So we'll grab these two and we'll just pop them over here. So from the decrement, we're going to be setting the decrement boolean value. And just to uncheck that there we go. Okay, so what we'll be doing here is we'll be using the event tick, which we did have in the blueprint earlier, but we deleted it because we didn't need it at that point in time. So the event tick is an event which fires every frame. The reason why we're using this is that we want to perform the event tick. We want to perform, the correct functionality through these, but we want to kind of base it on the length of time that the buttons are pressed. So the event tick, generally we try not to use it as much as possible because it is calling every frame, but we are going to be using branch conditionals to make sure that these aren't running all of the time. So from the event tick, we're going to run the first conditional, so we're going to run the first branch in, and we're just going to check if we are running the increment button. So if it's true, we'll perform the increment button functionality. If it's false, we'll do another check, and we'll check to see, are we pressing the decrement button. So if we're pressing the decrement button, we'll run the code from the true. If false, then we'll do nothing, which means that if both of those are firing false, then the event tick, it's a little bit less workload in terms of what's running in the background for the game. So let's focus firstly on the increment button pressed. So we've got our amount to toss and maximum toss quantity. We're going to be running a couple more checks just to make sure that we're staying within the correct bounds. That was the whole point of setting these two variables up to start with. So what we're going to do is, from the increment, we're going to run another branch, so another conditional. And the condition of this branch is basically going to say, is the amount to toss, so get amount to toss, and we're going to add 1 to it. So is amount to toss, is it greater than the maximum toss quantity? So let's say that we have 20 in our quantity. That will set max toss quantity to 20. Let's say that we have our amount to toss is 18. If we plus 1 to it, that would make 19, so that would be false. So we could add 1 to it, and again to 20. But then if our amount to toss is 20 and we plus 1 to it, then that would make our that would make the result would be true, because it would be over the amount of the toss quantity. So what we're going to say is, if it is true, then the output is going to basically be that the amount to toss is going to just be equal to the maximum tossable quantity. If it's false, then the amount to toss is just going to be amount to toss plus 1. So we can just wire that straight into there. So we check if adding 1 to the amount to toss is going to be greater than what the actual maximum amount is going to be. We just set it to be the maximum tossable quantity, so we can't go any higher. If it's false, which means that we can't add 1, then we just set it to be add 1. Now, one thing that we'll also do just before we get to this branch here is that because this is running every frame, this is going to run incredibly fast. So what we'll do is we'll just insert a delay into here first, and we'll set to something like 0.3. There we go. We can always come back in here and check. We just want to have a slight delay before we add more onto the quantity. Otherwise, it's going to kind of, we hold down the mouse button, it'll zip through. We hold down the mouse button to decrement, it'll zip through again. Okay, so that's all cool for adding. So the decrement is going to be kind of the same sort of setup, but a little bit, well, obviously going the opposite way. So we're going to run the same thing with the delay again, because we only want this to happen at a slower pace than once every frame. So we're going to run the same branch check, and it's going to be basically kind of the same sort of premise. So the amount to toss, if we minus 1 from it, and that is less than 0. So if we had 1, in fact, actually no, if it's less than 1, sorry. So if amount to toss minus 1 is less than 1, so if we had 1 and we minus 1 and that gets to 0, we don't want to get to 0. We only want to set it to 1. So what we're going to do is we're just going to set the amount to toss is going to be set to 1 if that's true, which means that we can never go lower than 1. If we go to 0, there's no point in having a 0 selected because, well, there's just no point. That would mean that we'd have to close the menu down. So likewise, with the false, it's going to kind of be the same sort of setup up there. It's just going to be the amount to toss minus 1. Okay, so that's all stored quite nicely for that. What we'll do is we will comment this section. We'll leave the event tick outside in case we ever need to use the event tick again. Remember, you can only have one instance of the event tick node inside your graph. So we could come back here and maybe add a sequence or something off here. So we're going to call this is going to be our increment and decrement logic. Let's just compile that, and before we test this, we need to make sure that the number value in here is actually bound to the correct value. So that text there, we are going to have to create a binding. So we'll create binding, and it's simply going to be in here. Well, we'll rename it first just so we know what it is. So this is going to be set amount to toss, and the amount to toss is just going to be the amount to toss, and it's going to be fed into there as a toText node. There we go. So if we compile that now, let's give this a quick check to see if this works or not. So we'll pick up some stackable items. Press the letter I on our keyboard. We've got our stackable item there. Let's just click on it. Let's just open up the toss item. So you can see that it defaults to 1, which is exactly what we wanted. If we try and press the decrement, it doesn't go any lower than 1. If we go higher than that, you can see that it goes up. And if we press and hold down the button, it will go it will increase for us, and vice versa the other way. There we go. So obviously the amount of time between is a little slow, so what we'll probably do is make that a little bit faster in the graph. So if we go back to the event graph, let's just set these delay values here to something like 0.2, which I think is the default anyway. Cool. Okay. So we've got that logic set up there. The next thing to do is to have a look at how we would actually remove this from the inventory. So it's going to be kind of a similar process to the tossing the non-stackable item logic, although we need to do a little bit of calculation. So what we're going to do is we're going to firstly grab the toss multi confirm button. If we can find it in here, it might be that I've not named it properly. Decrement toss. There we go. Confirm multi. So we want to say on click, and we're going to have to run from this a branch before we actually confirm. So unlike the toss single confirm button where we just remove it from the index straight away, we're going to have to run a branch. And the reason being is that we need to check how much it is that we're actually removing. So what we could say is if the amount to toss is equal to the maximum tossable quantity, so amount to toss is equal to the maximum tossable quantity. If that's true, then we'll want to just remove it from the index. So we will get, we could pretty much copy and paste this from up here. So we're going to say remove from index, refresh, and action complete. If it's false, so if amount to toss is not equal to the maximum tossable quantity, then we'll want to remove the amount to toss. Now this is going to be a little bit different to obviously this up here. What we want to do is from the false, we want to use our set array element function. So you might remember this from earlier on when we were adding stackable items. It's going to be pretty much the same principle, but just in reverse. So the target array is going to be the inventory, so we can grab and just hook that into there. Let's just make sure this is nice and tidy. So it's going to be the same, it's going to be the data inventory, the data array to hook into there. The index is also going to be the slot index, because obviously it's the index that we clicked. And in terms of the item, this is where we need to set up our items. So what we're going to do is we'll just grab another copy of this over here just to make sure we keep things nice and tidy. We don't want lots of cables all over the place. So we're going to say get and get a reference, and we need to set the inventory array to be the slot that was clicked. We're going to break item data. Just open that up, and we're going to make item data. So remember, we need to make a new entry to fit back into the slot. So everything's going to be the same except the quantity, which is what we're going to use to adapt or change the amend the amount that we're going to change. So it's going to be the quantity minus the amount to toss, and we can stick that into there, and that will set our array element. Now all we need to do is after that is hook this up back into the refresh inventory and the action complete, and that will get rid of all of our menus and take us back to the main inventory screen. So let's compile this, let's give it a check and see if this works or not. So we'll have to collect some stackable items, and let's jump in our inventory. So we have 60. Let's go into our item menu. Let's go into the toss item menu, and let's just try and get rid of half of the amount that we need to get rid of. There we go. So if we press confirm, that should get rid of 30, and you can see that it did, and it got rid of all of our other menus. So the next thing to check is can we get rid of the entire inventory index. So if we go to confirm, let's just go and make sure that we get to 30. There we go. And if you press confirm, you can see that it removes it completely from the inventory, because obviously we don't have any left, so we can get rid of the actual index. So that's great. That looks like everything's working perfectly fine. The last thing to do really is just to quickly configure the cancel button. It's going to be pretty much the exact same as this. So in fact, what we can do is just copy and paste this down here. So Control W. And we'll just need to run our, we'll make sure we get our close multi button and just use the on-clicked event for that. And just make sure that it's not the toss single menu, it's going to be the toss multi menu. So a toss multi menu, let's just hook that up into there. There we go. So just to keep everything nice and tidy, let's just comment all of that, and that's going to be our toss stackable item logic. Cool. So just to wrap up the video and have a look at what we've done, we started by creating some variables to handle whether our input button was pressed or not. So this could be useful for things like if you're doing a mobile game, rather than have to keep tapping the screen, you can just tap the button down once and you can increase the amount. So this is just to toggle pressed input. We then ran some increment and decrement logic. So this was run through the event tick. So this is being updated every frame, only if we can say that we are pressing either the increment or decrement buttons. So one thing that you might want to do to kind of build upon this section here, you may want to have a look at a system where this duration here speeds up the longer that you have the item pressed. At the minute, it just does it at a set speed. So that could be something that you may want to improve. But the idea here is that the amount to toss is checked to make sure that it's not going to exceed the maximum toss quantity, and it's not going to exceed the minimum amount, which is set to 1. So once that's done, we can run our confirm multiple toss logic. We're going to do firstly a check to say, is the amount to toss equal to the maximum toss quantity? If it is, we can simply just remove the index completely and be done with it. If it's false, then what we do is we set the array element, and basically this just allows you to amend the item that's already in there. So all we're doing is getting the information that already exists in that array index. We break the item data and we make a new entry with the quantity minusing the amount to toss that we've specified, and that basically gets fed back into the item data. Once that's all done, we can then refresh the inventory, action complete, and that basically loops back to our close item menu code up here, just to get everything back to where it should be. So yeah, so we'll wrap that up there. The next videos will focus on implementing some actual functionality. So we'll have a look at how we can get things like health and all that sort of stuff set up. We'll have a look at interfaces for another method of passing information from one blueprint to another.